So last Saturday, my wife Claire went to this extravagant party thrown by her friend Lisa. Now, before you judge, let me just say, I am not some controlling husband. I just had one simple request not to wear that super short dress. You know, the one that barely covers anything? I didn't think it was a big ask, but of course, Claire saw it as a personal challenge. I came home late from a work event and immediately noticed Claire was gone. Not surprising, but irritating. I sent her a text, "Please wear something decent." No response. Whatever, I thought. She'll do what she wants anyway. I should have known something was up right then and there. Fast forward to around 2 a.m., she stumbles through the door, completely drunk. And that S, when I saw them hickeys, lots of them, all over her neck. My heart sank and my stomach churned. I tried to keep my cool, but I couldn't help asking, "What are those?" She slurred, "Shut up, I'm an independent woman. I can do whatever I want." She looked at me with this defiant glare, like she dared me to say something else. The smell of alcohol was overpowering, and the sight of those marks made my blood boil. I spent the rest of the night lying awake, my mind racing. Who had she been with? What else had she done? By morning, I knew I couldn't just let this slide. I called my lawyer first thing Monday and started filing for divorce. Claire didn't take the news well at all. She flipped out, calling me every name in the book and accusing me of trying to control her life. And here is where it gets messy. Claire wasn't ready to let go. She bombarded me with messages, left voicemails, crying, and even showed up at my work, causing a scene. I kept telling her it was over, but she wasn't hearing it. I couldn't believe how quickly my life was unraveling because of one night and one short dress. The day after I filed for divorce, Claire was a complete wreck. She showed up at our house in the middle of the day, tears streaming down her face, begging me to reconsider. I could see the desperation in her eyes, but I was beyond caring at that point. "Please, Jake, I can explain everything," she sobbed, clutching at my arm. I pulled away, trying to keep my cool. "Explain what, Claire? The hickeys? The fact that you blatantly disregarded everything we built together? There's nothing left to say." She dropped to her knees, crying harder. It was a mistake. I was drunk. It didn't mean anything. I couldn't believe her audacity. A mistake? How many times did you have to make that mistake to get those hickeys? You didn't just trip and fall into someone's lips, Claire. I turned and walked away, leaving her on the floor. I needed space, needed to think. But Claire wasn't about to let me off that easy. She followed me around the house, still pleading, until finally, I had to leave. I got in my car and drove to a nearby park, trying to clear my head. That S when my phone started blowing up with messages from her. The tone varied from apologetic to downright nasty, each one more erratic than the last. "You can just leave me like this," one message read. "This is your fault, Jake. You pushed me away," another said. I ignored them, deleting each message as it came. I knew I needed to stay strong, but it was hard. We had been together for 8 years, and throwing that away over one night seemed surreal. But then I remembered those hickeys, her defiance, and the way she refused to take responsibility. When I finally got home, she was gone. I thought maybe she had finally accepted it and decided to leave me alone. But no, Claire had other plans. The next morning, I woke up to find her sitting on the porch, looking as if she hadn't slept. She was a mess, her makeup smeared, hair disheveled. "You can do this to me, Jake. You can just throw everything away," she said, her voice shaky. I took a deep breath. "Claire, you did this. You made your choices and now you have to live with them." She stood up, her eyes blazing. "You think you're so perfect. You think you never made mistakes. You're not a saint, Jake. That was the final straw. I couldn't stand there and listen to her try to turn this around on me. I never cheated on you, Claire. I never betrayed your trust. That is the difference." She stormed off, shouting over her shoulder, "This isn't over, Jake. You'll regret this." And she meant it. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of chaos. Claire started showing up everywhere I went. Work, the gym, even the grocery store. It was like she had a sixth sense for knowing where I'd be. She'd make scenes, crying and yelling, trying to make me look like the bad guy. My colleagues and friends began to notice and ask questions. "What's going on with Claire?" one of my coworkers asked. I shrugged, trying to play it off. We were going through a rough patch. but it was more than just a rough patch. Claire started spreading rumors about me, telling everyone I was the one who cheated, that I was controlling and abusive. It was like living in a nightmare. People I thought were my friends started giving me strange looks, distancing themselves. One night, I got a call from Lisa, the friend who threw the party. "Jake, I think you need to know something," she said, her voice hesitant. I braced myself. "What is it, Lisa?" "Claire's been telling everyone that you hit her, that you are the reason she is acting this way." I felt the blood drain from my face. "That is not true. You know me, Lisa. I would never." "I know, Jake. I just thought you should know what she's saying." The next day, I met with my lawyer. "We need to speed up this divorce," I told him. "She's ruining my life." He nodded, understanding. "We'll do everything we can, Jake. But you need to gather evidence. Keep records of everything she does and says. We can use it in court." I started documenting everything, keeping a journal of her erratic behavior, saving her text messages and voicemails. It was exhausting, but I knew it was the only way to protect myself. And just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, they did. One night, Claire showed up at my house with a police officer, claiming I had hit her. I was stunned, but I stayed calm, showing the officer my records and explaining the situation. Fortunately, the officer believed me and left, but the damage was done. I knew then that this was just the beginning. Claire wasn't going to give up easily. She was determined to make my life hell, and I had to be ready for whatever came next. After that night with the police, I realized just how far Claire was willing to go. It was a wake-up call, and I knew I had to be more vigilant than ever. Her behavior was becoming more unpredictable and dangerous. I installed security cameras around my house and made sure to lock everything up tight each night. It was like living in a fortress, but it gave me some peace of mind. A few days later, I got a call from my friend Mark. "Hey, Jake, you might want to sit down for this," he said, his voice serious. "What now?" I asked, already dreading his response. "Claire S. been telling people you're addicted to drugs. She's spreading it all over social media." My heart sank. "Are you serious? How can she just make up stuff like that? She is unhinged, man. You need to do something before this gets out of hand." I knew he was right, but what could I do? Claire S. lies were like wildfire, spreading quickly and burning everything in their path. I decided to confront her, but I needed to be smart about it. I didn't want to give her any more ammunition to use against me. That evening, I texted her asking if we could meet somewhere public to talk. She agreed, and we met at a local coffee shop. She looked different, almost manic, her eyes darting around as if she was expecting something to happen. "Claire, you need to stop this," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "You are destroying both of our lives." She laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. "You think I'm destroying our lives? You did this, Jake. You started this when you filed for divorce. You cheated on me. What was I supposed to do? Just let it slide?" She leaned forward, her expression hardening. "You have no idea what I've been through, Jake. You pushed me away, made me feel worthless." I sighed, realizing this conversation was going nowhere. "Claire, we're done. You need to move on. Find someone else. Get help, whatever it takes. But you need to stop attacking me." She stood up abruptly, knocking over her chair. "You'll regret this, Jake. I promise you." As she stormed out of the coffee shop, I felt a sense of dread. Claire was a ticking time bomb, and I had no idea what she was going to do next. The next few weeks were a blur of court dates, meetings with my lawyer, and dealing with the fallout from Claire S. lies. People at work were starting to avoid me, whispering behind my back. It was infuriating and exhausting, but I kept pushing forward, knowing I had to see this through. One night, I got a call from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to pick up. "Hello? Jake?" "It's Lisa." I was surprised. We hadn't spoken since the party. "Hey, Lisa, what is up? I need to tell you something. It is about Claire." "What now?" I asked, bracing myself for more bad news. "She's been having an affair with my husband." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. "What? Are you sure?" "Yes. I found messages between them. It has been going on for months. I felt a mix of anger and relief. Anger because of the betrayal, but relief because it explained so much. Thank you for telling me, Lisa. I'm so sorry you're going through this. It's okay. I just thought you should know. Maybe it can help you in court. I hung up, my mind racing. This was a game changer. I called my lawyer immediately and he agreed. This could turn things in your favor, Jake. We'll need to get those messages and present them in court. Over the next few days, Lisa sent me everything she had. The messages were explicit and left no doubt about the affair. It was painful to read, but it was exactly what I needed to prove my case. The court date finally arrived, and I walked in with a renewed sense of determination. Claire was there, looking smug and confident. But as soon as we presented the evidence of her affair with Lisa's husband, her demeanor changed. She tried to defend herself, but it was clear she was caught. The judge ruled in my favor, granting me the divorce and awarding me full custody of our assets. Claire was furious, but there was nothing she could do. Her lies had finally caught up with her. But the story didn't end there. Claire wasn't done with her vendetta. She began showing up at my house again, making threats and causing scenes. I had to get a restraining order to keep her away, but even that didn't stop her. One night, I woke up to the sound of someone trying to break into my house. I grabbed my phone and called the police, but by the time they arrived, Claire was gone. The security footage showed her trying to force her way in, a crazed look in her eyes. The police took it seriously, and with the restraining order in place, Claire was arrested and charged with trespassing. It was a small victory, but it felt like a step in the right direction. As the days went by, I started to rebuild my life. I reconnected with friends and family, people who had distanced themselves because of Claire's lies. It wasn't easy, but slowly I began to heal. After Claire's arrest, I thought things might finally start to settle down, but as usual, I underestimated her tenacity. The rumor mill kept churning and I was constantly on edge, wondering what she would do next. I had never felt so isolated in my life. But just when I thought I was alone, unexpected allies started to emerge. One afternoon I got a call from an old friend, Sarah. We hadn't spoken much since college, but we'd always gotten along well. "Hey, Jake. I heard about what's been going on. Do you want to grab a coffee and talk?" We met up at a local cafe, and as I filled her in on the craziness of the past few months, she listened attentively, occasionally shaking her head in disbelief. "Jake, this is insane. Claire has always had a flair for the dramatic, but this is on another level." "Tell me about it," I said, sipping my coffee. "I don't even know what to do anymore." "Well, you are doing the right thing by documenting everything and keeping your lawyer in the loop. But you can go through this alone. You need support." Sarah and I began hanging out more, and she introduced me to a support group for people dealing with toxic relationships. It was a game changer. Hearing other people's stories, realizing I wasn't alone, gave me a strength I hadn't felt in a long time. Meanwhile, Claire continued her campaign against me. She showed up at my workplace one afternoon, causing a huge scene. She screamed about how I was ruining her life and demanded to speak to my boss. Fortunately, my colleagues were beginning to see her true colors, and security escorted her out. But the real turning point came when I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, Jake? This is Detective Collins from the local police department. We've been looking into some recent activities related to your ex-wife, Claire." My heart skipped a beat. "What kind of activities?" "We've received multiple reports of harassment and threats from several individuals, all pointing back to Claire. We'd like you to come down to the station to discuss this further." When I arrived at the station, Detective Collins showed me a folder filled with complaints and evidence. Claire had been harassing not only me but also Lisa, her own family members, and even some of my co-workers. The detective explained that they were building a case against her for stalking and harassment. "This is serious, Jake. We believe she has been using multiple phone numbers and fake social media accounts to continue her attacks. We are issuing a restraining order against her for all involved parties." It was overwhelming, but also a relief to know that the authorities were taking action. Detective Collins assured me they would do everything they could to keep Claire from causing further harm. With the restraining order in place, Claire's antics started to die down, but I knew better than to let my guard down completely. I continued to stay connected with my support group and leaned on Sarah and my newfound friends for strength. One evening I got a call from Lisa. Jake, you're not going to believe this. Claire S. been arrested again. What happened? She broke into her ex-boyfriend S. house and tried to attack him. The police caught her in the act. It was shocking, but not entirely surprising. Claire had clearly spiraled out of control. The news spread quickly, and suddenly, people began to see the truth about her. The rumors and lies she spread about me started to lose their power. As Claire faced legal consequences for her actions, I started to feel a sense of closure. I focused on rebuilding my life, enjoying the peace that came with her absence. Sarah and I grew closer, and for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful about the future. But the story doesn't end there. Claire's final act of desperation would prove to be the most shocking of all, revealing secrets I never could have imagined, and testing my resolve in ways I never thought possible. With Claire behind bars, I finally felt like I could breathe again. The peace was almost surreal, but a part of me remained cautious, knowing Claire's unpredictability all too well. Life began to settle into a new normal. Sarah and I continued to grow closer, and my support group became a source of strength and comfort. One evening, I received a call from Detective Collins. "Jake, we need you to come down to the station. There's something you need to see." My stomach churned as I made my way to the police station. What now? I thought. When I arrived, Detective Collins led me to a small room and handed me a file. "This was found among Claire's belongings," he said, his expression grave. I opened the file and my heart stopped. Inside were letters, dozens of them, written by Claire. They were addressed to various people, some I knew, others I didn't. But it wasn't just the letters that shocked me. It was their contents. Claire had meticulously documented her affairs, detailing every tryst, every lie, and every scheme she'd concocted to manipulate those around her. I skimmed through the pages, my hands shaking. One letter in particular caught my eye. It was addressed to Lisa's husband, Paul. "Paul, I know this is risky, but I can't stop thinking about you. Jake is oblivious as usual. We need to be more careful, but I'm willing to take the risk if you are. Let us meet at our usual spot next week. I can wait to feel your hands on me again." I felt a surge of anger and betrayal. Paul, one of my closest friends, had been sleeping with my wife behind my back. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. But as I continued reading, the letters took an even darker turn. In one particularly disturbing entry, Claire detailed a plan to frame me for abuse. She had been collecting evidence to support her claims, intending to use it to ruin me if I ever tried to leave her. Jake is such an idiot. He'll never see it coming. Once I have enough evidence, I'll go to the police. He'll lose everything: his job, his friends, his freedom. And then maybe he'll realize he should have treated me better. I felt sick to my stomach. Claire had been plotting to destroy me for years. It was chilling to read her words, knowing how close she had come to succeeding. Detective Collins placed a hand on my shoulder. "I know this is a lot to take in, Jake, but these letters are crucial. They not only prove her guilt, but also clear your name. We'll be using them in court." The court date arrived, and I walked in with a newfound sense of determination. Claire was there, looking more disheveled than ever. Her confidence had been replaced with a wild, desperate look. The evidence we presented was overwhelming. The letters, combined with witness testimonies and security footage, painted a damning picture of Claire's deceit and manipulation. The judge ruled in my favor, finalizing the divorce and granting me a restraining order against Claire. She was sentenced to several years in prison for harassment, stalking, and attempted fraud. As the gavel came down, a wave of relief washed over me. It was finally over. But the aftermath of Claire's actions left deep scars. I struggled to rebuild my life, grappling with the betrayal and the lingering effects of her lies. My relationships with friends and family were strained, and it took time to repair the damage. Sarah was a constant support through it all. She stood by me, helping me navigate the emotional turmoil and find a sense of normalcy again. We spent more time together, and our bond grew stronger. It wasn't long before we started dating, and for the first time in years I felt genuinely happy. Life slowly began to move forward. I found solace in my support group, sharing my story and listening to others who had been through similar experiences. It was therapeutic, helping me process the trauma and find closure. But just when I thought I had seen the last of Claire, she managed to pull one final stunt. From prison, she began sending letters to mutual friends, claiming she had found God and was a changed woman. She begged for forgiveness, painting herself as a victim of her own mental illness. Most people saw through her act, but a few gullible souls fell for it. They reached out to me, urging me to forgive her and move on. It was frustrating, but I refused to let Claire control my life any longer. I focused on my future, building a new life with Sarah by my side. With Claire in prison and the restraining order firmly in place, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. But the damage she had inflicted was far-reaching. My reputation, relationships, and mental health had all taken a hit. The journey to rebuild my life was just beginning. Sarah was my rock during this time. She helped me stay grounded and focused on the future. We spent countless hours talking, laughing, and rediscovering the simple joys of life. It was a slow process, but with her support, I began to heal. One day, while Sarah and I were having lunch at our favorite cafe, she brought up an idea. "Jake, have you ever considered therapy?" I hesitated. I don't know. I've always handled things on my own. Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. "You've been through so much. There's no shame in seeking help. It might be good to talk to someone who can help you process everything." After some thought, I decided to give it a try. I found a therapist who specialized in trauma and relationships, and began attending weekly sessions. It was tough at first, opening up about my experiences and confronting my emotions, but gradually it started to help. I began to understand the depth of Claire's manipulation and how it had affected me. In therapy, I learned techniques to cope with the lingering anxiety and trust issues. I also started to rebuild my self-esteem, which had been shattered by Claire's relentless attacks. It was empowering to take control of my mental health and work towards a brighter future. Meanwhile, Sarah and I grew closer. Our relationship blossomed into something beautiful and genuine. She was patient, understanding, and never pressured me to move faster than I was comfortable with. It was a stark contrast to the chaos and toxicity I had experienced with Claire. As we approached the 1-year mark since Claire's arrest, I felt ready to take another step forward. I decided to sell the house. It was filled with too many painful memories, and I wanted a fresh start. Sarah and I began looking for a new place together, somewhere we could create our own memories and build a future. During the move, I found an old box of photos and mementos from my life with Claire. At first, I considered throwing it all away, but my therapist suggested something different. Why not have a closure ceremony? Go through the items, acknowledge the past, and then let it go. It sounded a bit hokey, but I decided to give it a try. One evening, Sarah and I sat down with the box. We went through each item, reminiscing about the good times and acknowledging the bad. It was emotional but cathartic. At the end, we burned the photos and letters, watching the flames consume the remnants of my past. As the fire died down, I felt a sense of peace. It was as if a chapter of my life had finally closed, making way for a new one to begin. Sarah wrapped her arms around me, and we stood there in silence, feeling the weight of the past lift away. But just when I thought the drama was behind me, Claire managed to make one final move from prison. She filed an appeal, claiming she had been coerced into her actions due to her mental illness. It was a long shot, but the thought of her getting out early sent chills down my spine. I contacted Detective Collins and my lawyer, preparing for the worst. We gathered all the evidence again, ready to defend against her appeal. The court date was set, and I felt a familiar sense of dread. The day of the hearing arrived, and I walked into the courtroom with Sarah by my side. Claire looked gaunt and defeated, a shadow of her former self. She pled her case, but it was clear she had no remorse for her actions. Her appeal was denied, and she was sent back to prison to serve her full sentence. As we left the courtroom, I felt a renewed sense of closure. Claire's final attempt to disrupt my life had failed, and I could finally move on without looking over my shoulder. Sarah and I celebrated that evening, toasting to new beginnings and a future free from Claire's shadow. Life slowly returned to normal. I threw myself into my work, reconnected with old friends, and continued my therapy sessions. Sarah and I moved into our new home, creating a space filled with love and laughter. It wasn't always easy, but we faced each challenge together, growing stronger as a couple. One sunny afternoon, Sarah and I were having a picnic in our backyard. She looked at me with a twinkle in her eye. "Jake, I have something to tell you. What's that?" I asked, intrigued. She smiled, taking my hand. "I am pregnant." The words hit me like a tidal wave of joy. I pulled her into a hug, tears of happiness streaming down my face. "We're going to be parents," I whispered, feeling a sense of completeness I hadn't known was possible. In that moment, I realized that despite all the pain and betrayal, I had come out stronger on the other side. Claire's actions had nearly destroyed me, but they had also led me to a place of true happiness and love. The future was bright, and I was ready to embrace it. Stay tuned for Part 7, where I navigate the challenges of impending fatherhood and unexpected events from Claire's past resurface, testing my resolve and the strength of my new family. Finding out Sarah was pregnant was the best news I could have ever received. It felt like a new chapter was beginning, one filled with hope and excitement. We started planning for the baby, turning a spare room into a nursery, picking out names, and attending prenatal classes. Life felt like it was finally moving in a positive direction. But as we prepared for our new addition, unexpected events from Claire's past began to resurface, threatening to disrupt our newfound peace. One afternoon, I received a call from Claire's mother, Marge. We hadn't spoken since the divorce, and hearing her voice brought back a flood of memories. "Jake, I know this is out of the blue, but I need to talk to you about Claire," she said, her voice tinged with urgency. I was hesitant. "Marge, I don't know if please, just hear me out. It's important." Reluctantly, I agreed to meet her. We met at a quiet cafe, and as soon as I saw her, I could tell something was wrong. She looked worn and worried, a stark contrast to the composed woman I remembered. "Jake, I am sorry to drag you into this, but Claire has been writing to me from prison," Marge began, her hands trembling slightly. "She's claiming that she has found evidence that could reduce her sentence." I felt a knot form in my stomach. What kind of evidence? Marge sighed. "She says she has proof that someone was manipulating her, pushing her towards all those terrible things she did. She wants me to help her bring this to light." I shook my head. "Marge, I don't know what to say. Claire's done so much damage. I don't think I can get involved in this. I understand, Jake, but there's more." Claire mentioned someone named Paul. She said he was deeply involved in everything. Paul. The name sent a jolt through me. He was the same man Claire had an affair with, Lisa's husband. The pieces started to come together in a way that made me uneasy. "Marge, Paul was having an affair with Claire. He's not a good guy." Her eyes widened in shock. "I had no idea, but Claire insists he has something to do with her behavior. She said he was controlling her, manipulating her into doing all those things." It sounded like another one of Claire's elaborate lies, but there was a part of me that couldn't ignore the possibility. If Paul had been involved in some way, it could explain a lot about Claire's actions. I decided to do some digging. I contacted Lisa and explained the situation. She was understandably upset, but agreed to help. Together, we started looking into Paul's background, trying to find any connection to Claire's behavior. What we discovered was more shocking than I could have imagined. Paul had a history of manipulating and controlling women. There were reports of harassment and emotional abuse from previous relationships. It seemed Claire wasn't his first victim. With this new information, I approached Detective Collins. "Detective, I think there was more to Claire's story than we realized. Paul might have been manipulating her." Collins was skeptical at first, but as we presented the evidence, he began to see the pattern. "This changes things, Jake. We'll need to investigate further, but if Paul was indeed manipulating Claire, it could affect her sentence." While the investigation was ongoing, Sarah and I focused on preparing for the baby. Despite the looming uncertainty, we tried to stay positive and enjoy this special time. Our relationship grew stronger as we faced each challenge together. A few weeks later, Detective Collins called with an update. "Jake, we've confirmed that Paul was involved in manipulating Claire. He used her vulnerabilities to control her actions." We were working on bringing him to justice. It was a bittersweet moment. Claire's actions were still inexcusable, but knowing she had been manipulated added a layer of complexity to the situation. I felt a mix of anger and sympathy for her. The court revisited Claire's case, and with the new evidence, her sentence was reduced. She would still serve time, but there was a possibility for early release with good behavior. It was a small victory, but it felt like a step towards closure. As the months passed, Sarah and I welcomed our beautiful baby girl into the world. Holding her for the first time, I felt a profound sense of love and responsibility. This tiny life represented a fresh start, a chance to build something positive out of the chaos. We named her Grace, a symbol of the grace we had found in our lives despite the hardships. Our days were filled with the joys and challenges of parenthood, and each moment with Grace felt like a gift. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. One evening, as we were settling into our new routine, I received a letter from Claire. She had been released early for good behavior and wanted to meet. She claimed she had changed and wanted to make amends. I was torn. Part of me wanted to move on and leave the past behind, but another part felt a responsibility to hear her out. After discussing it with Sarah, we decided to meet Claire together. We met at a park, a neutral place where we could talk openly. Claire looked different, more composed, but there was a sadness in her eyes that hadn't been there before. "Jake, Sarah, thank you for agreeing to meet me," she began, her voice sincere. "I know I've caused you both a lot of pain, and I am truly sorry." Sarah and I listened as Claire explained her side of the story. She admitted her mistakes and took responsibility for her actions. She spoke about the manipulation she had endured from Paul and how it had distorted her sense of reality. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Claire said, her eyes welling with tears. "I just want you to know that I am trying to be better, for myself and for everyone I hurt." It was a difficult conversation, but it felt necessary. Hearing Claire's remorse and seeing her effort to change gave me a sense of closure I hadn't expected. It didn't erase the past, but it allowed me to move forward without the weight of unresolved anger. As we parted ways, I felt a strange sense of peace. Claire's chapter in my life was finally closing, and a new one was beginning. Sarah and I returned home to Grace, ready to embrace the future with open hearts. Life with Grace was everything I could have hoped for. Sarah and I were navigating the ups and downs of parenthood together, growing even closer as we adjusted to the demands of our little one. Grace was a joyful, curious baby, and each day with her felt like a blessing. Just when I thought things were finally settling down, an unexpected visitor from Claire's past showed up at our doorstep, threatening to disrupt our peace once again. One Saturday morning, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find a woman in her early 30s, looking anxious and a bit lost. She introduced herself as Rachel, a former colleague of Claire's from years ago. "Jake, I know this is sudden, but I need to talk to you about Claire," she said, her voice trembling slightly. I invited her in, unsure of what to expect. Sarah joined us in the living room, Grace nestled in her arms. Rachel took a deep breath before she began. "I worked with Claire at her old job. We were friends for a while, but we lost touch. Recently, I've been going through some personal issues, and I found some old letters Claire had written to me. They mentioned someone named Paul and how he was manipulating her even back then." My heart sank. The name Paul seemed to haunt me, constantly resurfacing in connection to Claire's turmoil. Rachel handed me a stack of letters, and as I read through them, it became clear that Claire had been under Paul's influence long before I ever knew. In one letter, Claire wrote about how Paul would make subtle suggestions, planting ideas in her head and slowly eroding her confidence. He had a way of making her feel indebted to him, controlling her actions through a web of emotional manipulation. Reading those letters was like piecing together a puzzle. It was evident that Paul's hold over Claire had been stronger and more insidious than I had realized. I felt a surge of anger towards him, and a renewed sense of sadness for Claire. "Why are you telling us this now?" Sarah asked gently, sensing Rachel's distress. Rachel looked down, tears brimming in her eyes. "Because I have been through something similar. I was manipulated by someone I trusted, and it nearly destroyed me. I wanted you to know the truth, to understand what Claire went through. Maybe it can help you find some peace." Her words hit me hard. I had spent so much time resenting Claire for her actions, but seeing the extent of Paul's influence made me realize just how deeply she had been trapped. It didn't excuse her behavior, but it did provide context that I hadn't fully understood before. "Thank you, Rachel," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "This means a lot. I wish Claire had shared this with me earlier. Maybe things would have been different." Rachel nodded, wiping away her tears. "I hope this helps you find some closure. Claire wasn't a bad person. She was just lost." After Rachel left, Sarah and I sat in silence, absorbing the weight of what we had learned. Grace cooed in Sarah's arms, a small reminder of the new life we were building together. "That was intense," Sarah finally said, breaking the silence. "Yeah," I agreed. "But I'm glad Rachel came. It helps to understand Claire's actions, even if it doesn't change what happened." Sarah reached out and took my hand. "We've come so far, Jake. We're stronger because of everything we've been through. And now, we can focus on our future." Her words were a comfort. We had weathered the storm, and now it was time to move forward. I decided to visit Claire in prison one last time, to share what I had learned and to find closure for myself. When I arrived at the prison, Claire looked surprised to see me. We sat across from each other, the heavy atmosphere of the visitation room pressing down on us. "I found out more about Paul," I began, watching her reaction closely. Her eyes widened, and she nodded slowly. "He manipulated you for a long time, didn't he?" Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, he did. I was so afraid, Jake. I didn't know how to break free." I nodded, feeling a mix of sadness and relief. "Rachel showed me the letters you wrote. I wish you had told me sooner. Maybe we could have done something." Claire wiped her eyes, trying to compose herself. "I was ashamed. I didn't want you to see how weak I was. You weren't weak, Claire. You were trapped. But you have a chance to start over now, to be better." She looked at me with a mixture of gratitude and regret. "Thank you, Jake. I am truly sorry for everything I put you through." I left the prison that day feeling lighter, as if a burden I had carried for years had finally been lifted. Claire's chapter in my life was finally closed, and I was ready to embrace the future with open arms. Back at home, I focused on the joys and challenges of parenthood. Grace was growing fast, and each milestone brought new excitement. Sarah and I settled into a comfortable routine, balancing work, family, and our relationship. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. One evening, as we were preparing dinner, my phone rang. It was Detective Collins. "Jake, we've arrested Paul. He was trying to manipulate another woman, but she came forward before things got out of hand. He is facing serious charges now." It was the final piece of the puzzle falling into place. Paul was finally being held accountable for his actions. I felt a sense of justice, knowing he wouldn't be able to hurt anyone else. As Sarah and I sat down to dinner, I looked around the table at my family. Despite all the challenges and heartache, we had built something beautiful together. Our past didn't define us, it had shaped us into who we were, stronger and more resilient. Stay tuned for Part 9, where we continue to build our future, facing new adventures and unexpected surprises, and finally, the ultimate test of our love and resilience as a family. Life began to settle into a comforting rhythm after Paul's arrest. With him behind bars and Claire's chapter of my life firmly closed, I felt like I could finally breathe easy. Sarah and I focused on raising Grace and enjoying the small moments that made life sweet. But, as we had learned, life has a way of testing us when we least expect it. One sunny afternoon, we decided to take Grace to the park. Watching her toddle around, chasing butterflies and giggling with delight, filled me with a sense of profound happiness. Sarah and I sat on a bench holding hands, soaking in the peace of the moment. As we watched Grace play, I noticed a man approaching. He looked vaguely familiar, but I couldn't place him. He walked straight toward us, a determined expression on his face. My heart began to race. Who was he? "Jake?" "Sarah?" he asked, stopping a few feet away. "Yes," I replied cautiously. "My name is Michael. I am Claire's brother." The name hit me like a ton of bricks. Claire had mentioned her brother a few times, but I had never met him. He had always lived out of state and hadn't been involved in her life much. "Michael, what brings you here?" Sarah asked, sensing the tension. "I'm sorry to show up out of the blue like this, but I needed to talk to you," he said, his voice heavy with emotion. "Claire dying." The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. Claire was dying? What happened? I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. She was diagnosed with terminal cancer a few months ago. She didn't want to tell anyone, but as it progressed, she realized she needed to make amends. She asked me to find you and bring you to see her. I glanced at Sarah, who gave me a supportive nod. "Of course," she said. "Jake, you need to go." Michael gave us the details, and the next day I found myself driving to the hospital with a heavy heart. Claire had caused so much pain, but knowing she was facing her final days, I felt a mix of sadness and empathy. She deserved a chance to make peace. When I arrived, Michael met me at the entrance and led me to Claire's room. She looked frail and tired, a shadow of the woman I once knew. But her eyes lit up when she saw me. "Jake," she said weakly, a small smile forming on her lips. "Hi, Claire," I replied, taking a seat next to her bed. "Thank you for coming." "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't eat," I admitted. "But I am here." She nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "I am so sorry for everything, Jake. I know I have said it before, but I need you to understand how truly sorry I am. I've made so many mistakes. I know, Claire. I know you were manipulated, but you also made choices. It's been hard, but I've moved on. We've all moved on." She reached out a trembling hand and I took it, feeling the fragility of her grip. "I'm glad you've found happiness. You deserve it." We talked for a while, reminiscing about the good times and acknowledging the bad. It was a difficult but necessary conversation. By the end, I felt a sense of closure that had eluded me for so long. As I left the hospital, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Claire's death was imminent, and though she had caused so much pain, I couldn't help but feel a deep sadness for her. She had been a part of my life, and her passing marked the end of a tumultuous chapter. Back home, Sarah and I continued to focus on our family. Grace was growing quickly, and each day brought new milestones and joys. We celebrated her first birthday with a small gathering of close friends and family, cherishing the moments of laughter and love. One evening, as Sarah and I were putting Grace to bed, my phone rang. It was Michael. "Jake, Claire passed away this afternoon. She was at peace. She wanted me to thank you for coming to see her." I felt a lump in my throat. "Thank you for letting me know, Michael. I'm glad I got to see her." After I hung up, Sarah wrapped her arms around me. "How are you feeling?" "Sad," I admitted, "but also relieved. It feels like a weight has been lifted. She's at peace now, and so am I." We stood there in silence for a while, holding each other, grateful for the love and stability we had found together. But life's challenges weren't done with us yet. A few weeks later, I received a letter from a lawyer representing Claire's estate. She had left a portion of her assets to Grace, along with a letter for her to read when she was older. It was a final gesture of love and regret, a way for Claire to make amends even after her death. Sarah and I discussed it at length, deciding to accept the inheritance on Grace's behalf. We would save the letter for her, ensuring she could read it when she was old enough to understand. As we settled back into our routine, an unexpected opportunity arose. Sarah was offered a job in another city, a chance to advance her career and provide a better life for our family. It was a big decision, but we agreed it was the right move. We packed up our things, said goodbye to friends and family, and started a new chapter in a new city. It was an exciting and nerve-wracking time, but we faced it together, confident in our love and resilience. Life in the new city was bustling and full of promise. Sarah thrived in her new job, and I found work that was fulfilling and allowed me to spend more time with Grace. We made new friends and built a community that supported us. But just as we were finding our footing, an unexpected visitor arrived at our door. It was Paul, freshly released from prison, looking remorseful and seeking forgiveness. Seeing Paul at our doorstep was like a nightmare come to life. I hadn't expected to see him again, let alone have him standing there looking for redemption. Sarah and I exchanged a tense glance before I stepped outside to talk to him. "What are you doing here, Paul?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. "I know I'm the last person you want to see, Jake," he began, his voice filled with remorse. "But I needed to apologize, to you and to Sarah. I've done a lot of thinking while I was in prison, and I realize how much pain I have caused." Sarah came out and stood beside me, her expression guarded. "Paul, you've done more than just cause pain. You've destroyed lives. Why should we believe anything you say?" Paul looked down, clearly struggling with his emotions. "I understand your skepticism, but I'm not here to make excuses. I just want a chance to make things right, if that is even possible." I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of everything that had happened pressing down on me. "Paul, I appreciate that you're trying to take responsibility, but your actions had severe consequences. Claire's life was destroyed, and we're still picking up the pieces." He nodded, tears brimming in his eyes. "I know, and I'm truly sorry. I am not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to help in any way I can." We stood there in silence for a moment, the tension palpable. Finally, Sarah spoke up. "We need time to process this, Paul. We're not ready to just move on and forget everything." Paul nodded. "I understand. If there's ever anything I can do to help, please let me know. I'll leave you my contact information." He handed me a piece of paper with his phone number and address before turning to leave. As he walked away, I felt a mix of emotions, anger, sadness, and a small glimmer of hope that maybe, just maybe, people could change. Over the next few days, Sarah and I discussed Paul's visit at length. We talked about the possibility of redemption and what it would mean for us to let go of the past. It was a difficult conversation, but we both knew that holding on to anger and resentment wouldn't help us move forward. In the end, we decided to take things slowly. We reached out to Paul, cautiously allowing him into our lives in small ways. He attended therapy and support groups, working hard to rebuild his life and prove that he was serious about changing. Meanwhile, our life in the new city continued to blossom. Grace was growing fast, and we cherished every moment with her. Sarah excelled in her job, and I found fulfillment in my work and in spending quality time with our daughter. One evening, as we were putting Grace to bed, she looked up at us with her big, innocent eyes. "Mommy, Daddy, why are you sad?" Her question caught us off guard. We hadn't realized how much our internal struggles had shown. Sarah and I exchanged a look, realizing that we needed to address our feelings, not just for ourselves, but for Grace's sake. "Sweetheart, sometimes Mommy and Daddy have a lot on their minds," Sarah said gently. "But we are okay. We are here for you, and we love you very much." Grace nodded, satisfied with the answer, and drifted off to sleep. Sarah and I sat together on the couch, holding each other and talking about everything we had been through. "We've come so far, Jake," Sarah said, her voice soft. "We've faced so many challenges, but we were still here, stronger than ever." I nodded, feeling a sense of gratitude for everything we had built together, and we'll keep moving forward, no matter what. In the months that followed, Paul continued to make amends, gradually earning our trust. He found a job and began volunteering at a local shelter, helping others who were struggling. It was a slow process, but his genuine efforts to change were evident. One day, Paul asked if he could meet Grace. Sarah and I discussed it and decided to allow it, with careful supervision. It was an emotional meeting, but it also felt like a step towards healing. As Grace grew older, we told her the truth about our past, in age-appropriate ways. We wanted her to understand that people can make mistakes, but they can also change and find redemption. Life continued to bring its ups and downs, but we faced each challenge together, stronger as a family. We learned to forgive, to let go of the past, and to embrace the future with hope and resilience. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Sarah turned to me. "Jake, I am so proud of us. We have been through so much, but we have built something beautiful out of it." I smiled, feeling a deep sense of contentment. We have, and we'll keep building one day at a time. In the end, it wasn't just about surviving the storms of life. It was about finding the strength to rebuild, to forgive, and to love unconditionally. Our journey had been filled with trials, but it had also brought us closer together, forging a bond that nothing could break. As we looked out at the horizon, holding hands and feeling the warmth of the setting sun, we knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, we would face them together. Our story was one of resilience, of redemption, and of the unbreakable power